Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves.
Right. And, I think that's where the agile thing comes in too, because the agile thing is basically protective in as much as it says, look, if we've got this wrong, we'll run with it for a short while and we'll see what happens. And if we're getting feedback that this is a wrong approach, then we'll change. And we'll figure out what it is that's gone wrong, and we'll sort of make an adjustment, and then we'll conduct another little experiment.
Yeah.
And then we'll respond to that. And that's a better way of navigating and solving the problem than sort of being pig-headed and saying, I've got the solution, I know exactly what to do here. And at the end of the day, it fails because it was never going to work because it was the wrong solution to begin with, or it was the wrong assessment of the problem.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. We've covered some of this in the past, talking about solving problems through collaboration, and the role of the leader. In this case, we're talking about CEOs, is to not necessarily have the answers, but to facilitate a process with the best brains in the room. So somewhere in the room, there's the answer, and it may not just reside with one person. It could result just out of the pure collaboration.
And that's why I think agile is not so much a methodology as it is a way of thinking. It's a bit like science is not just a body of knowledge; it's a way of thinking.
Yes, it could be. Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? It's because it was sort of taken by the IT sector, and now it's in the broader business community as well. But the earlier ideas of agile was definitely a methodology, I think, and there have been many books written about that, the agile methodology. But now I think, yeah, you're right. It may have morphed more into a way of thinking.
Well, I think it probably always was a way of thinking first of all, and methodology came out of that.
Yeah, probably. But a lot of those business books, we all know that they could be just a short white paper, couldn't they? So.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah. So, all right. So, where are we up to, Craig?
Let's have a look at some examples then. So we go through courage, and we're talking about we've basically just talked about 5 areas: facing problems, convictions, criticism, giving and receiving, and then errors, and then challenging people. Why don't we have a look at facing problems? So what are some, let's talk about some tactics that CEOs can use to face problems and to get the job done rather than just hiding under the covers, so to speak, from the problems.
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is to figure out what the problem actually is.
Yeah, the problem-solving process, right? So
that problem-solving process is a big, complicated issue, really. And it involves, first of all, being aware that there is a problem, then sort of figuring out what the problem is.
Yeah.
Sorting out what the problem does.
Yeah.
Then figuring out why the problem exists.
Yeah.
And once you do that, then you can look at how can we solve it? What are the tactics and what are the strategies we can use to solve it? And you go through the same process with that.
Yeah.
Describe what they look like, how will they work predictively, and then explain why they're going to work.
Yeah.
But, I think if you shortcut any of these things, you're setting yourself up for more problems down the track because it's less likely it's going to work.
Well, also because you're setting yourself up for an autocratic process, aren't you? And you're not bringing people with you. So it's, the decision's coming from the top. Maybe that's your leadership style, but hopefully you're doing it in a more collaborative way. And in that case, you need a process like you just outlined to solve these problems, I think. And then that way you can bring people with you.
And I think that collaboration is not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because it's a way of, if you've got people who are insightful and who know what they're talking about and who are able to think about stuff, then they're more likely to recognize the problems that exist. They're more likely to be able to describe what they look like and why they exist and what effect that they have.
Yeah, I think as a leader, or I think it's a good idea to sort of. I liken it to making cakes. I make cakes with my granddaughters, right? My young granddaughters, but I always get the ingredients ready and the oven at the right temperature and all the other stuff. So it's all basically 80% done, and they come in and do the 20%. But they think that the cake's theirs and they've made it, and they're very proud of it. And that sounds like a very paternalistic, I suppose. But to be honest, you can do leadership in a similar way. You can prepare things so that people are. You've got a clear set of ground rules and clearly define, like you said, the process of the problem that you're trying to solve, and you're not just giving people a clean sheet. So it's actually just guided them to actually what we're trying to actually get done, and then all of the actual doing and the fresh ideas and things like that are focused and targeted on getting the right outcome. So I think that's a way in which you can do it. Yeah. What about convictions? So do you have a good example of convictions and how you can? Some leaders become very controversial, don't they? So I don't think we want to get into that space at the moment. But some leaders get very noisy about making a stand on things and so on. But at its core, what is the importance of convictions, as far having convictions and the courage of your convictions in a leadership role like a CEO?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, that you can guarantee the process. The content, you can't guarantee so much. So, if, for example, your conviction is based on your worldview, I believe in this particular cause, and you standing up for that, that's not always the best thing to do.
Right.
But if what you're convicted about or convinced about is the process, and the process is creating safety, getting lots of people to contribute, listening to lots of different perspectives, recognizing that nobody has the complete picture, trying to define what the problem is, trying to figure out what the problem does in the organization, trying to figure out why it exists. All these things are process factors,
right?
And I think that if you go through that process and you do it as best as you can, at the end of the day, to move forward, someone's got to make a decision.
Yes.
And if you feel like, okay, we've done this, we've done it the best we can, we're not going to improve it at the moment. This is where the short sprint type thing comes in.
Sure.
If we don't bite off too much, we can try a little bit out and see how it works. And if we're wrong, we'll find out, and if it works, then we're probably on the right track. We'll take it a bit further.
Yeah, I think the challenge for a lot of leaders is they're very passionate about what they're doing, but they need to have convictions that can be related to. So if they've got convictions to support or to make decisions and move in a certain direction, they've got to be able to sell that, because if it's just, this is what I'm excited about and this is what we're going to do. So for example, if you're working in an FMCG company, but your passion as a CEO is the F1 or something, and you want to sponsor an F1 team or something like that, then all of the people in the company may not even be interested in F1. And so what is the point? And you need to have convictions that are actually in line with the company values and the interests or the passions of the people that you're leading. I think otherwise it's just you talking to yourself, isn't it?
Well, you have to. It's not there for you to push your own agenda.
No.
It's a group thing.
Yes.
And you rely on a kind of a scientific approach, which is kind of process that I'm talking about. And, you know, at the end of the day, your own personal views of it may not necessarily feature or need to feature that much.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably better to try and keep that out as much as you can.
What about criticism? Do you have any advice for me on how I can better accept criticism? Because, you know, I have this face that gives away the fact that I'm not entirely happy with what I'm hearing. So how do I handle that better?
I think practice, Craig. I think next one we should spend a whole session just me criticising you, and we'll see how you do. Maybe people can comment down in the section there and give you a mark.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I think the point is that you know, if you follow a sort of an objective process and you do that as best you can, there's no guarantee that it's going to work because you don't know all the variables necessarily, and you don't know how they're going to interact. So you might find that it's wrong, but if you're using an agile kind of approach, then you don't bite off too much. So you're not committing yourself and, you know, sticking your neck out too far, but you're testing the waters, adapting as you go along. Now, if people are going to criticize you for that, then basically, you know, they don't understand how scientific process works.
Yeah.
But
I think when I'm receiving criticism, if some people are throwing up other options or other solutions rather than just criticizing, I think, it's the people who just have problems, nothing but problems, or nothing but critical. I think that's who I have the most issue with. But when someone says, you know, you've proposed this and this and this, but what about we try it this way or that way, and we're still going to get to the same point, but it's probably going to cause less damage or cost less or something like that. I think that's a sort of critical process I like. And the other thing is to have it sort of current. So not waiting 2 or 3 weeks for it, but if it happened, then get on it, sort of thing. Having something that's timely. I think also not humiliating someone is a good idea. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So not criticizing someone in a large group in front of their peers or something, or if someone's dressing you down in front of your subordinates or whatever it is, then that's pretty risky strategy.
Well, I think that's where that psychological safety piece comes in.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. You know? But having an environment where people feel they can voice their opinion and criticize a decision or something in a constructive way, I think that's a very healthy work environment. What about so learning? There's many ways we can learn. I think we've covered learning in a lot of different ways. So making errors, pushing the limits, and making learning a key part. I think when you do make errors, I think it is important to have that specific discussion about what the key, well, I don't like the word learnings, but the key outcomes were that were able to be improved upon, and the decisions that were made as a result, rather than just, oh yeah, we made a mistake, let's move on. No, what were the key things that were learned out of making that error? I think it's good to be explicit about that.
Absolutely, that's the whole reason of it. You know, you're learning by doing, and then you're refining. You're refining what you know how to do as you come to understand it better.
And the last point, I suppose, was about the challenging people. I think I'm a sales and marketing guy, so I've worked with a lot of very high-level sales directors and things like that, and you know they've got egos bigger than Donald Trump, right? So I think you got to be having the courage to challenge people like that is important. But also, once again, in the criticism thing, if you are challenging someone, it is a type of criticism, and you got to go with solutions or alternate ways of achieving the outcome. I think so.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody needs to, you know, I mean, ideally have the spirit of being teachable.
That's right. Yeah, well, that's got to be part of the culture in the organisation, isn't it? So always be learning and always looking for ways for improvement. So. That's right. All right, so that's been an interesting discussion. So, talking about courage today for for CEOs that want to be successful, they need courage, and we covered about 5 major areas of courage. One was the courage to face problems, and work out solutions in a timely manner for that. The courage of your convictions, so to make a stand on certain points and not necessarily be dissuaded. Don't make decisions based on the last corridor discussion or the last Zoom call, but actually stand by your convictions. Be prepared to give constructive criticism and encourage an environment where you're willing to receive constructive criticism. Work in an environment and show leadership through an ability to admit errors of judgment and making errors in process, but also be explicit about what was learnt from the errors and push on, because an environment where you're able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes is a very healthy environment. And then be prepared to challenge people, no matter how strong their personality is, but related to the criticism point is be constructive in how you challenge people and propose further solutions. So they're the main points we covered off today. I hope you found it interesting, and as always, Steve and I had fun. So thank you. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsafin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.